Good evening, this is Goldie, also known as Mr. Anecdotal, Mr. Pasty, and the Talking Head. It's Wednesday, June 1st, 2011. Remember, I rant so you don't have to. If I don't have your email and you'd like to receive the script of each show, send me your email to my new email address, which is goldyrant@gmail.com. You know, I listen to Rush, Neil Boortz, Hannity, Chris Matthews, politicians, and I have to say I'm sick of them saying that they're trying to solve the problems of this country and the world. And all they're doing is promoting their own candidates without even touching on the actual problems. They ask the wrong questions, both on purpose and due to stupidity. Here's a brief summary of what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about the wrong question, since the wrong question is all that you hear during this election cycle, and more generally, all the time. I will look at the wrong question in terms of pit bulls, redistricting, global warming, the economic collapse, the drought and water use in Texas, the Patriot Act, and health care. Most, I'm afraid, will be off script. I came home today from the Y, and there were 2 cop cars out front, and they had a pit bull cornered next door. The pit bull was fixed and was probably someone's pet. It was a male. It reminded me of an ex-girlfriend that loved pit bulls. I remember hearing it's not the breed, it's the owner. Well, guess what? This pit bull charged the mother of a small baby and my roommate. The cops were sitting out here for about an hour. Then animal control came, 2 of them, and they netted the pit bull. My roommate asked the wrong question. He said, "How did the dog get out?" We should not have to ask that question. It is a dangerous breed, and I don't give a shit if it has never been violent. There is no place in this society of people that live in close proximity to each other for this or other dangerous breeds. It's a dog. It's not a human. Humans are more important than dogs. It charged a woman with a baby. Put it down. Don't ask the wrong question. I was talking with my Tea Party friend, and we were lamenting on Judge Napolitano on Freedom Watch his penchant for railing against government spending. My friend asked me, when did people stop spending money from home equity loans on vacations, clothes, and cars? In other words, in this last recent cycle. The answer was, of course, pretty simple. When the lenders stopped lending. We were able to use that as the analogy that as long as politicians did not have term limits and were beholden to donors or even voters, they would not stop spending until the lenders stopped lending. There are various derivatives of this idea, and there are other factors at play, but for grins, let's just say that China is our biggest lender. When will they stop lending? Their middle class is growing, is expecting more material things, and is demanding more things. What are the odds that China wants to stop Americans from buying crap at Bed Bath & Beyond, Walmart, or Target? Pretty low. Pretty low odds. Let's assume that someday they actually do stop lending, which means they stop buying U.S. government securities and stop wanting to hold U.S. dollars. Let's say they call in the loans. What happens? Well, an interesting rabbit hole to go down left us, my Tea Party friend and I, in a terrified state. Here's one possibility. Like third world countries that get told what to do when they cannot refinance. In other words, they're forced to change their policies and even some of their own laws and regulations. It's possible that China would effectively foreclose on whatever properties the government owns, the U.S. government owns. So government buildings, roads, national parks, national forests, rights to water and air, oil leases, mineral leases, and most importantly, the right to pollute under existing regulations. Holy effing shit. Finally, I may have come up with an actual reason to care about getting the structural regulatory defect fixed before we default on our debt, and the lender comes calling for our coal, oil, national parks, roads, and basically anything else owned or controlled by the government. Again, the judge and the other fiscal austerists are asking the wrong question. I don't want to call them conservatives because there are too many connotations to that phrase. And since they are asking the wrong question, they have to make up reasons to cut the deficit. So that scary thing is that potentially the Chinese could come in, or any of our lenders, when we stop paying our debt, and say, we want that mountaintop. We want the right to cut off that mountaintop and grab the coal and spill as much crap as we can down in the streams. We want the right to generate as much electricity that we sell to you with no pollution controls. And they could do it. That's a scary, scary proposition. Very scary. Because I've always been bugged by the judges' continued over and over and over again about the budget. I'm not talking about fairness. I'm just talking about what happens when the lender comes a-calling. And it means that the structural regulatory defect that we have has to be handled before we default, so that the lender cannot use these rights that are sitting here under this defective structural regulatory, under this defective regulatory system that we have. I spoke last week a little bit about the redistricting fight currently going on in Texas. The Republicans hold huge majorities in the Texas House and Senate. A June 1st, 2011 article in the Austin American Statesman shows how the wrong question is being asked. It's entitled, Redistricting Plan for U.S. House has 5 Travis slices, and they mean Travis County. Let me read a little bit from it. As Governor Rick Perry declared Tuesday that lawmakers should redraw congressional districts during their newly begun special session, legislative leaders proposed a map that would effectively split Travis County into 5 districts and target U.S. Representative Lloyd Doggett for defeat. Travis County is a big blue dot in the center of Texas. 3 members of Congress now represent the county, but the map unveiled by the chairman of the redistricting committees in the State House and Senate put almost all of Travis County in 5 districts. The proposal appears designed to split heavily Democratic Travis County among 4 Republican congressmen and a Democrat from San Antonio. The map, quotes, is contemptuous of the people who live in Travis County, said State Senator Kirk Watson, Democrat of Austin. By the way, he was a mayor here, and he's been a state senator for quite a few years now. It's funny because I've talked in the past about how the way to beat a lie detector test is to stress the true portion of the statement that you're saying. And that's what these guys do. So let me keep reading. Doggett wasn't finding any advantages in the map proposed Tuesday. Quotes, their goal is to deny a voice for our unique Austin community, where neighbors of all ethnic backgrounds can come together to serve in elective office, Doggett said. Their plan will mean Congress members who are less accessible, less accountable, and more beholden to moneyed special interests as election costs soar in these bizarre districts. The maps that were drawn by the Democrats during their reign in Texas were as ugly as what these Republicans drew. And you always hear complaints from the Democrats. It's diluting their representation. And when the Republicans were out of power, you heard, these maps are bizarre and they keep us out of power. Actually, what the maps do, generally, is make it so that incumbents win. And it's usually the party in power, incumbents win. That is defective. The wrong question is, how do we get more Democrats in there? That's the wrong question. The right question is, what allows them to do this redistricting based on gerrymandering in order to get more Republican votes and more Republican majorities in the U.S. Congress? Because that's really what this is for. That's the right question. What is the defect that's out there that even allows any party in power to slice these things up to protect incumbents? Well, as I've said before, the structural regulatory defect can be solved by a couple of things. The structural regulatory defect is, of course, that corporations are people, have free speech rights, and get to donate as much as they want to political campaigns. Structural regulatory defect is there's no term limits for U.S. senators and U.S. congressmen. The structural regulatory defect is that people can donate as much as they want. The structural regulatory defect is these same senators, congressmen, and regulators in the EPA, Mineral Mining Service, go to work for the companies that lobbied before them for regulations. That's the structural regulatory defect. If these guys could only serve 1 term or 2 terms, they wouldn't care so much about what it looks like. I mean, I guess they might care about the Republican or the Democrat that comes after them. They might do that. But if we put term limits in there, these same guys wouldn't be in there for 30 years, entrenched, beholden to corporations and to special interests and unions. They're asking the wrong question when they appeal to Democratic voters saying, this is why you need to put more Democrats in the State House, so the Republicans cannot have as much power. No, that's false. We need to figure out how to make sure redistricting occurs with similar-minded people in mind. So, for example, it sure seems like the 4th largest city in Texas, Austin, should have specific representatives based on its population. That requires a constitutional amendment. That's the right question. They ask the wrong question. Okay. Neil Bortz, who's a nutty guy on Fox Radio, yesterday talked a bit about the recent discovery by the oil industry of some new fields in South Texas. I think it was South Texas, I believe. I was a little woozy from my injury, but it was definitely in the U.S. Neil talked about how the oil industry profits that the Democrats had wanted to tax a few weeks ago were responsible for this great new find. Their profits. As usual, he is a Republican and is of course asking the wrong question. His question is actually, why would we want to tax these great companies that are supplying our insatiable demand for oil in the U.S.? Well, the fact is that these oil companies are subsidized. Everything is subsidized on a sliding scale based on the amount of taxes that they pay, the tax breaks that they get, and the cost of acquiring their leases. The public leases that they get, we, the people, do not get paid what they are worth. We subsidize that. Talked about this last week with the petroleum engineer that makes $120,000 a year. We're actually subsidizing all of those employees. We are subsidizing, we the taxpayers are paying shareholders of these companies their profits. He's asking the wrong question. It's probably because he doesn't understand the system. And the system is set up so that Exxon pays money and can buy every single senator that's running for the Senate in 2012. They can give them $10 million. They can't give it to them. They can buy them advertising time. It's actually under the Citizens United case because they have a free speech right. That means that those senators will pick up the phone when Exxon calls. They can give a job to the regulators that give them the oil leases. That means those regulators pick up the phone when Exxon calls. They actually pick up the PDF draft of the legislation when Exxon sends it in, because those regulators know they're going to get jobs when they get out with Exxon. That's just the way it is, legal. Now, Neil complaining that the Democrats wanted to tax these oil company profits more, raise tax rates for oil companies, saying that that's going to kill us or do whatever it does. Their costs are pushed off on all of us, and they privatize their profits. Garrett Hardin talked about that. It's called the commonized cost, privatized profits game. So when you talk about that the Democrats want to tax these guys that went out and found new oil, I promise you, So long as there is $1 of profit in a barrel of oil, there will be somebody going out and acquiring it. The question we have to ask is, first, are we willing to subsidize the shareholders of Exxon? Are we willing to take taxpayer money and give it to Exxon shareholders? That's the first question. The second question, of course, is the structural regulatory defect that allows them to write the regulations and write their own tax policies. All right. There was an article in the Austin American-Statesman dated May 1st, 2011 about the economic collapse entitled, "Home Prices in Cities Reach 8-Year Low." You might have heard about this. It was just there. Oops. It was June 1, sorry. Kind of alarmist. They're talking about a double dip. I think I talked last week about extend and pretend and what's going on in the commercial market. It was called Home Prices in Cities Reach 8-Year Low. Let me read a couple things. Home prices in cities dropped in March to the lowest level since 2003, showing that housing remains mired in a slump almost 2 years into the economic recovery. A backlog of foreclosures poised to reach the market means prices may stay depressed, dissuading builders from taking on new home construction projects. Unemployment at 9% and stricter lending conditions are signs that any recovery in housing may take years. Farther on down, further declines in home prices are likely to constrain the consumer spending that makes up 70% of the economy. 70% of the economy is consumer spending on crappy candles from Bed Bath & Beyond, as homeowners feel less wealthy and have little home equity to borrow against. Let's talk about this a little bit. Extend and pretend is the concept of there are commercial loans that are due, and the lender just writes an extension, takes the interest that hasn't been paid, this is in commercial, takes the interest that hasn't been paid, adds it to principal, and gives you a 1-year extension, hoping that a year from now there'll be more tenants or there might be buyers for the property and they can get paid their money back. Similarly, all of these programs to help homeowners, including that scam, all of the scam projects that the feds had imposed on lenders to help people not get foreclosed on, extend their loans out for their homes, all of those are like extend and pretend. Because the number of those people that have extended, it's like a giant number. 70 to 80% of all those people are still going into foreclosure just a year later. Well, I'm not doing the fairness argument right now, but I've been wondering when I'm going to have work again. And when I read something in the Tierra Grande that it could be 5 to 8 years before they shake all the crap out of the system in the commercial market because of all this extend and pretend. And similarly, because of all the extend and pretend in the housing market. You have all this money sitting on the sidelines, vulture funds. And they use the word vulture, it's like a negative connotation. It's just buyers waiting to buy mortgages or houses or properties. The fact is, the prices of the properties have not dropped because the foreclosures have not happened. Until the foreclosures happen, the system will not reboot. Now, I'm not talking about whether or not we want to reboot it to back where it was, but nobody can get a loan right now. There's no lending going on in the commercial market. Most retailers are not renting new spaces or building new stores. Everywhere. Nothing is happening. So we've talked about in the past the abyss. And us staring at the abyss in October, November 2008. And how bad could it have gotten? Now, besides the fairness argument, which I'm not talking about, I'm just talking about actually getting the system going again. It's seeming like it would be better that they stop all of this extend and pretend. If you are a non-performing loan, posted for foreclosure, foreclose. In 1988, this happened. By 1991, we were coming out of it. I represented buyers in the law firm that I worked in. A lot of apartment complexes, a lot of commercial properties, a lot of houses. This does not get into the fairness argument. I'm just talking about the quality of what's going on. And what's going on right now is nothing. There are no buyers. Nobody knows what the true prices are because of government supports. Now, I'm not calling for getting rid of the supports. I'm saying that if you're going to complain about the housing market or the real estate market, you have to understand the two concepts. One, extend and pretend, and two, fairness. The fact that there's a Democrat in the White House means there's going to be more fairness for average Joes. Notwithstanding, he's more of the same. He's not quite more of the same on several factors, and this is one of them. If there had been a Republican in the White House, it is doubtful that there would have been any homeowner assistance to try and put off these foreclosures. From a fairness perspective, that'd be terrible, because there was a lot of very wealthy people that made a lot of money off of scamming off of these loans. But for a structural argument, I'm thinking we would have been better off shaking this thing out. We would have had some bread lines. We would have maybe gotten some structural changes. So it's interesting. And them going ahead and doing fairness, they may have prevented the ability of a structural change to happen on how loans are made and how they're packaged and how they're sold off. All right. There's an article in the Austin American Statesman dated May 31st, 2011, titled "Drought Has West Texas Starting to Resemble Dust Bowl of the 30s." This article details the water problems we were having in Texas. Neil Bortz was talking yesterday about how Democrats are using the global warming argument to hijack the environmental movement and to promote cap and trade. Again, he's asking the wrong question. Let me read a little bit. And I've talked about water before, but I feel like I should talk about it again. This is in La Mesa, which is West Texas. The wind in West Texas is famously powerful and incessant. But this year, more big blows than anyone can remember have roared through, stripping away precious topsoil and carrying off another season of hope for farmers and ranchers. Everywhere it seems, the land is on the move. Sand builds up in corners of the just swept front porch and costs clean laundry on the line. Dust flies up your nose and in crevices of farm machinery. Drive along unpaved county roads and the farmer's plight becomes clear. Wind rakes the surface, scouring sand into adjacent fields, sweeping into farmers' deeply tilled furrows. Sounds ugly. We've all seen the pictures, 30s and 50s. Quotes, "Global weirding is the best way to describe what we are seeing," said Catherine Hayhoe, a climate scientist at Texas Tech University. There's a lot going on these days that's not what we are used to seeing. That's a message phrase, by the way. It's a Fox message phrase. While much of the nation focuses on the flooding Mississippi River, the Oklahoma Panhandle is enduring its longest drought on record. Some communities have not had rain in 8 months. Texas is especially hard hit. More than 82% of the state is experiencing extreme or exceptional drought. 3/4 of Texas wheat crop has been rated as poor or very poor. All right. I guess my point is, when I hear Neil Bortz talking about global warming, he's giving you the Republican line that we want to continue to commonize the costs of polluters and privatize the profits. So they don't want to pay the true cost of whatever cleanup there would be. I kind of think that it actually doesn't matter if global warming is man-made or not. Kind of like I don't care if 9/11 was done by the U.S. government or not. There are destructive things happening to the commons that are being subsidized by all of us to increase profits for those polluting companies. Now, we just allowed, and I talked about it a few months ago, a Schlitterbahn, which is a water park up in Cedar Park. This is an area of high growth. Subdivisions are required to have lawns up there. Required. It's usually St. Augustine. Requires watering. We're like Tucson or Phoenix. Developers give money to local politicians so that they don't impose any type of zero-scape requirements. I hate lawns. I've lobbied the city of Austin to actually try and get the state to override these restrictive covenants that appear in these subdivisions. And this doesn't even talk about the actual cost of extending water out to this Schlitterbahn, this water park, these outlying suburban subdivisions. They pay a capital recovery fee, but it doesn't begin to tackle the cost of a new water treatment plant. Let's say we're at 50 million gallons per day capacity, and they push it over by one house. We have to build another $200 million plant. They pay $3,000. Commonize costs, privatize profits. The wrong questions are being asked. The right question is, what do we think is going to be the amount of water that we have to use, and how do we want to split that up among competing interests over the next 100 years? Not last year when we had a bunch of rain, and then they allow a whole bunch of new growth to occur. That new growth is not paid for by the developers that put it in. It is subsidized by us. The wrong question is being asked. If we could figure out what we really want to do with all that water, if we required urinals in the houses and toilets, we already have the low flow. We already have the low flow water shower heads. We should ban landscaping. Would you rather flush your toilet or water your grass? The wrong question is being asked. It happens all the time. It happens in everything. That's why one of my buddies down in Costa Rica asked, how come nobody else is bringing this up? I don't know why. We're not the smartest nuts in the pile. I'm just reading it. This ain't brain surgery. All right, from the Austin American Statesman dated May 27, 2011, entitled, Congress Beats Deadline, Renews Patriot Act for 4 years. We talked about the lynching of Osama bin Laden, and how it was the worst thing that ever happened, for a list of about 10 things. Let me read a part of it. Racing against the clock Thursday night, Congress approved a 4-year extension to key provisions of the Patriot Act that continue the ability of federal investigators to use aggressive surveillance tactics in connection with suspected terrorists. Overcoming objections from a bipartisan clutch of libertarian-minded lawmakers, the legislation passed the Senate 72-23 and the House 250-153. Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison, Republican of Texas, praised the Act's renewal. Thank God she was not the vice presidential candidate, and Palin was. The Patriot Act is a valuable tool in our intelligence community's arsenal, she said. By voting today to reauthorize the Patriot Act for 4 more years, a bipartisan majority in the U.S. Senate has fully equipped our officials on the front lines to continue to protect America. I got to just tear that apart. A bipartisan majority in the U.S. Senate has fully equipped our officials with taxpayer money on the front lines to continue to protect America with drones, defense spending, surveillance, cameras, data gathering, NSA, TSA, X-ray cameras driving around on the streets, looking inside your homes. Back to it. The vote on the bill came less than a month after U.S. Special Forces killed, well, let's say lynched, al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden in Pakistan, reassuring support on Capitol Hill in general for the anti-terror tools put in place in the wake of al-Qaeda's attacks 10 years ago. Administration officials have warned of possible retaliation attacks for the bin Laden killing, a fact that supporters of the Patriot Act cited Thursday. It's like 2 kids in the back seat, he hit me first. The raid that killed Osama bin Laden also yielded an enormous amount of new information that has spurred dozens of investigations, yielding new leads every day. Without the Patriot Act, investigators would not have the tools they need to follow these new leads and disrupt terrorist plots, needlessly putting our national security at risk. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, Democrat of Nevada, said, "You Democrats, I said that was the worst thing that could have happened for surveillance. I said the Patriot Act would be renewed. Defense spending, gitmo, torture, wars, cameras, civil liberty losses, searches of your cars, looking at your checking account, credit reports, listening to me rant, our phone calls. The worst thing that could have happened was the photograph of the lynching of Osama bin Laden. Worst thing ever for those items. I talked a bit last week about the documentary that was produced by the U.S. government and put on the military channel called Killing Bin Laden. You have to watch it and come up with the 10 ideas in there, themes that it is supporting, that documentary. I mentioned 6 of them. All right, here's something that's related. It's an article, May 27, 2011. House approves bill changing president's anti-terror powers. Brushing aside objections from the White House, the House of Representatives on Thursday passed a $690 billion defense spending bill. $690 billion defense spending bill. That would expand the president's authority to pursue terrorists around the world while limiting the government's options for prosecuting detainees. But House Republicans and some Democrats weren't moved by that argument. That was the argument that they wouldn't be able to bring people from Gitmo to the U.S. That didn't pass. But House Republicans and some Democrats weren't moved by that argument. Instead, added a measure that imposes further limits on the administration's authority by requiring that all foreign nationals accused of participating in terrorist attacks be tried by military commission, not in federal court. That means it doesn't have to happen in Gitmo. We could have a military tribunal somewhere in the U.S. So luckily that didn't pass. That provision is far worse than any of the Bush administration detention policies, said Ken Good, Managing Director for National Security at the Center for American Progress, a think tank with close ties to the administration. This is a giant step back. Good said the provision slipped in unnoticed because most lawmakers were focused on a provision that grants the president greater authority to pursue suspected terrorists without first consulting Congress. That provision builds on legislation passed after the September 11th attacks that allowed former President George W. Bush to pursue perpetrators of the attacks and their collaborators without first consulting with Congress. The bill that passed Thursday would no longer require that targets have a connection to September 11th. Instead, granting the president authority to use all necessary and appropriate force during the current armed conflict with al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and associated forces. $690 billion was a structural regulatory defect at play in this legislation. Of course it was. $690 billion. That's us, the taxpayers, subsidizing defense companies, surveillance companies, data gathering companies, CIA subcontractors. They lobbied. Now it has nothing to do with 2001, September 11th. So we've got a Patriot Act extension, and we've got increased executive authority for tracking terrorists around the world. with us, the taxpayers, picking up the tab. And they're cutting out school teachers? The wrong question. Question you're hearing in the Congress right now is, our debt is going to kill us. We have to cut Social Security, Medicare, entitlements. Yet we continue to subsidize the shareholders of these companies. Commonize costs, privatize profits. The structural regulatory defect under Citizens United. Halliburton is allowed to give as much money as they want to Kay Bailey Hutchison and John Cornyn and Rand Paul. And when they call, they pick up the phone. Then they call the generals and say, we need some more drones from Boeing, Lockheed. We need to send some troops to Libya. Oh, they need support. Well, Halliburton has the ability to do support. They're the only company that does. No bid contract. The wrong question. And we're okay with it. Freaking masses were dancing in the streets when the lynching photograph came out. Dancing in the streets. Kind of reminds me of the South Park episode of Obama getting elected. Randy quits his job. Dancing in the street, drunk. We got him. Let's give more money to Halliburton shareholders. It's disgusting. It's painful. All right. There's a blurb in the Austin American Statesman dated June 1st, 2011. I seem to be having a problem with May and June. Entitled, Republicans Question Healthier Food Plans. Quotes, House Republicans are pushing back against Obama administration efforts to promote healthier lunches, saying the Agriculture Department should rewrite rules it issued in January meant to make school meals healthier. They say the new rules are too costly. The bill approved by the House Appropriations Committee also questions a government proposal to curb marketing of unhealthy foods to children and urges the Food and Drug Administration to limit rules requiring calorie counts be posted on menus. Because you know how much that ink costs to print a menu and to put 250 calories, or in the case of a Big Mac, 1,100 calories. You gotta love this. The wrong question. The question that they ask, that these Republicans ask, based on their donors, is why do we have to do this? It'll cost us some money. Well, the fact is, we are all in the health insurance pool. When these kids are diabetic, that is a huge cost to the system. When we are paying the health care costs of these children, then we have a right. That gives us a right to say what they eat and how much they exercise. It's just how it works. Whether it's under Obamacare or private health care. I'm in an Aetna plan. There's a bunch of idiots in my plan. There's attorneys in the plan. They're fat, unhealthy, and diabetic. I work out. I pay the same rate as people my age. They want us to subsidize them. The idea that you can supply foods to school lunches and not have to provide the calorie counts, or say we can't have fruits here instead of ice cream because it may cut into their profits. They're making more money off of the fake plastic with sugar pudding that they give. It's the wrong question. And the way you hear it from Republicans is these nanny state socialistic Democrats want to tell us what to do. And the Democrats aren't even smart enough to bring up the argument that we all pay for this. The legislators in San Francisco do not come up and keep harping. Harp. You must harp as loudly in order to be heard. That's the way the system is. All right, now I've only been talking about the wrong question. Here is, and we've talked about healthcare before, and I'll talk about it again a little bit more right here. But there was a blurb in the Austin American Statesman dated May 30th, 2011, entitled, "State Aims to Cut Costs with Healthier Workers." Let me read it. Instead of imposing higher copays and rolling back health insurance coverage for state employees, Connecticut officials want their workers, state workers, to get annual physicals to help cut costs. A tentative agreement between Governor Daniel P. Malloy's administration and 45,000 unionized state employees calls for the creation of a so-called value-based health and dental benefits plan that tries to encourage workers to take better care of themselves and ultimately help avoid costly medical problems down the road. Close quotes. Finally, one bit of news that is not asking the wrong question. It shows some people actually asking the right question. Since the state pays the actual health care costs of these workers, they recognize that the service that the payer does, that's the health care payer, it's not actually insurance. It's just claims management. Therefore, if the people that you are paying the health care costs for are healthier, the total cost of that benefit will go down. In other words, if you are overweight and smoke, a doctor will tell you that annually, maybe getting you to change your behavior. It's more likely, however, that these workers will realize that their health care will go away, and they have an actual incentive to change their own behavior. Remember, I didn't come up with an answer for health care. I recognized that I could get most people to agree to some type of universal health care. That universal health care was flu shots for every citizen that wanted them. It's almost universal. Everybody would pay the extra penny to make sure that that flu doesn't float around. I wasn't able to come up with the system that will guarantee you that you get a lung transplant, because there isn't one. You don't get it now. You won't get it under Obamacare. Things are rationed now, things are going to be rationed then. Now that's the right question. At least here, in this specific situation. I remember a few years ago I went in to get a physical, and my Aetna said we don't pay for it. I had to pay the $750. I thought it was the stupidest thing ever, until I realized that Aetna actually makes money if I'm sick. They get a cost plus. All they are is managing the claims. They're not doing anything. They just manage the claims for the plan. That's all they do. So they want me to be sick. You think you're getting insurance, it's not really insurance. It's your group deciding on a plan that's going to be paid for by Aetna. And your group decides which procedures you get and which ones you don't under that plan. They don't ask us all. They just do it. Everybody's complaining about premiums, so they cut a few things, increase copays. Now, one of the things I did talk about was how much privacy were we willing to give up in order to determine the different amounts that each person should pay to get equal coverage. So, for example, if I work out every day, how much of a blood test or cholesterol test or weight test or fat test am I willing to have done in order to pay a little bit less on my premium? What kind of lung sample am I willing to give up to see whether or not I've had a cigarette? What type of blood sample and how often am I willing to do it in order to see whether or not I had a drink and I'm at risk for liver cancer or liver failure. Now, at least in Connecticut, under their specific plan, they were able to figure out that it is going to be cheaper. It already is cheaper if the plan pays, and the plan happens to be the state of Connecticut, pays for your physical. Because then you can see where everybody is, and a doctor says you're going to die in a year if you don't lose 100 pounds. That probably changes behavior. Well, it must, or they wouldn't do it. Because nobody's looking to spend more money. So they're asking the right question there. And it's a good start. Because generally speaking, the wrong question is being asked. Obamacare is bad. There's not even a question to be asked there. Republicans say it's wrong. We need to get elected. We'll get rid of it. You get to keep the current ration system with pre-existing conditions. So basically, if you ever have skin cancer, you can't get coverage ever again. You will die from skin cancer if you lose your plan. Also forces you to keep your job. That's the wrong question. All right, I'm going to read a little bit longer one here. It's about historic. I've been dragging it along for a long time. It was from the Austin American Statesman, April 28, 2011. County latest to consider reducing tax breaks for historic properties. The way it is right now is you can apply to become historic and you'll get a tax break. In the city, county, school districts, now most of these places are losing their money, so they're getting rid of these historic tax breaks. Once you did it and got the medallion or were deemed historic, you wouldn't be able to tear it down. You'd have to keep it up. You have to use the original colors, the original wood, original glass. Some of those things are true. I hate them. I hate old houses. I hate anything that keeps change from happening to real estate. And especially in this type of recession or depression. Or just generally. I've been asking the city council for years to allow 2-family garages. Let me read it. County latest to consider reducing tax breaks for historic properties. Recommendations come as city also considers changes to historic landmark program by Susana Gonzalez. Travis County officials are considering drastically reducing tax breaks the county offers historical properties amid criticism that many owners of high-dollar historical homes receive generous tax exemptions. By the way, there are companies that do this for a lot of money, and only wealthy homeowners can pay that fee. The Travis County Commissioners Court would be the latest taxing entity to curtail tax breaks for historical properties. The Austin School District last year removed exemptions for historical properties, although trustees are considering reinstating them this year. And the Austin Community College District also suspended tax breaks last year. So in the face of laying off teachers, the trustees are considering giving more tax breaks, which will remove some more money from their budget. ACC trustees are expected to decide next month whether to reinstate them. ACC staff members do not recommend it. The city is considering setting a cap on the tax breaks it offers historical homes. Now, most of these city council members need these neighborhood groups to get elected. And the neighborhood groups are the ones that really support these things. In the county's proposal, all historical properties, no matter the value, would receive a tax break of $350. Currently, high-valued historical landmarks, many in Central and West Austin, receive thousands of dollars in tax breaks. A committee of mostly representatives from the county and state charged with examining tax equity in the county recommends using the money that would be saved, an estimated $1.2 million, for exemptions for property owners who are 65 and over or disabled. I don't believe in that steering of a tax break for something else. Just get rid of it. Those tax breaks would increase from $303 to nearly $350 per person. The exemptions for 65 and older and disabled homeowners have been the same since 1994. The average home value has more than tripled since then. County Judge Sam Bisco, the presiding officer of the Commissioners Court, said he hopes commissioners make a decision on the proposal by June so that it could go into effect during the coming fiscal year, which starts in October. Today, the Austin City Council is expected to receive a briefing about proposed changes to the city's program and hear a recommendation to reduce the tax abatement. But couple it with the rehabilitation incentive, officials want to cap the city tax rate at $2,000 per owner-occupied historical home. a change that would affect 120 homes and save the city about $143,000 each year. Now, why would you possibly make a distinction between owner-occupied and non? The committee also recommends the county have more authority in designating landmarks. Currently, the Austin City Council designates historical landmarks, and each taxing entity decides whether to give tax breaks to those properties. So the City Council says it's historic, and then each of these taxing entities can decide whether or not to do it. According to the recommendations, the county would consider historical status only to structures built before 1930. The city currently considers any structure at least 50 years old for historical status. Also, the county would grant tax breaks for up to 10 years only. Currently, tax breaks are given in perpetuity. If the recommended criteria are adopted, the county may not grant tax breaks to existing landmarks that don't meet the new requirements. The county would also consider designating historical landmarks outside Austin city limits. We hope to study the matter and make our decisions early enough in 2011 to allow taxpayers to plan how to respond, Visco said. We want to be as expeditious as possible, but we want to do the right thing. Remember, I've said no one is entitled to the status quo. Don't buy something historic and think it's going to stay that way, okay? Under the county's current structure, historical residences receive an exemption for the entire appraised value structure, blah, 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 blah. Property assessed at $1 million that was designated historical landmark before December 1st, 2004, currently pays $358 in Travis County property taxes, but would have paid $3,098 without the historical exemption. The same property owner would pay to the city $1,258 in property taxes, but would have, that's with the historic exemption, but would have paid $3,994 without the exemption. All right. But Brian Rogers, a committee member and critic of the historical program, called the landmark program a tax dodge for many affluent historical homeowners. As usual, they're asking the wrong question. What is the reason to preserve these historic properties at all in these tough economic times? The key to value is location, location, location. Doesn't matter if it's historic, doesn't matter if it's not historic. It does matter if there's restrictions on what you can do with it. That does lower the property value. If you have to use those same triangular nails, that hurts the value of the property. Is this just so that old people don't feel like they're aging if the house across the street stays the same? Are they insane? Shouldn't we be increasing the ability of property owners to tear down, add units, add smaller housing, add rental units, add boarding houses, bring multiple family members back into their old homesteads? Isn't that what we should be doing? We should be doing that in good times or bad. Community is people, it's not things. Of course that is the correct way, versus giving rich people tax breaks and the ability to declare an entire neighborhood historic. It's something different than what they were talking about. Something that they threatened in one of my neighborhoods, imposing substantial financial liabilities and restrictions on their abilities to deal with their properties. They're asking the wrong question. Actually, the answer is easy. Don't have them. Oh, I like the old home. Who cares? Buy it if you like it. I, a taxpayer, do not want to subsidize your profits, because that's what's happening. You're paying less taxes than I am because you've gone through this thing and said this was the first black teacher in Austin. They lived here. Guess what? They're dead. Go build a little shrine to them somewhere in the cemetery. Personally do it, not with taxpayer funds. The wrong question. Got to ask the right questions. It's the only way you can identify the problems. That's what we're trying to do here. By the way, there have been a lot of questions about my 7 stitches above my eye. Very simply, I wear goggles when I play basketball. I've seen some very severe eye injuries, including detached retinas, people that don't play basketball anymore. I prefer stitches to blindness. A guy was throwing a basketball back in bounds, trying to save it. It hit my goggles, sliced. A lot of blood. A lot of good stories, though. And that's it. That's all there is today. I want to thank our sponsors, all of which support this form of conversation, but not necessarily the content. PianoByAngelo.com, Angelo Limbesis, who teaches and plays keyboards all over Austin. ZetaDesign.com for all of your decorative painting needs. You can make anything look like anything. AustinAreaPlumbing.com for all of your Austin plumbing problems. www.ticoadventurelodge.com, a small hotel in Samar, Costa Rica. Beautiful small hotel. Thanks to Janice and Chris. CNC Surf School in Samara at www.cncsurfsamara.webs.com. They got me up. La Vela Latina, great sunset bar and restaurant in Samara with a great red chair. Ambar Tequila at www.santospirits.com, an extremely smooth tequila. Another cool 4-unit green hotel in Samara called The Logan at www.thelogansamara.com. And of course, the Delicate Genius in Houston, who is a platinum sponsor. Thanks for coming out.